Hello, everybody. Welcome to Zone Defense. We talk all things NBA and NFL. Be sure to follow us on Spotify at Zone Defense Podcast and on Twitter at Zone Defense Pod. We also wanted to say a big thanks to all of our new subscribers that we've gotten over the last few weeks. And if you haven't yet subscribed, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below because it really does help our channel a lot. Also, leave a comment and let us know who you think is the best tight end currently in the NFL. Today, we will be doing another tier list. This time, it's the tight ends. How's it going, Roman?
I'm good, Drew. This is our last tier list in terms of position groups. I think this one will be a little bit more, have a little bit more disparity than the other ones. There's not many, great tight ends, but a lot of decent to average ones at best. But I'm looking forward to this one with you.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun, as it always is. I got my George Kittle jersey on. I don't know if a lot of people have tight end jerseys, but I personally love the tight end position. I don't know why. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to this, and I'll let you jump in here for the first one, Mr. Austin Hooper.
Yeah, in 2020, he signed with the Browns after being with the Falcons. I think his 2020 season was very underwhelming, only 4 touchdowns. Considering that he got a huge contract and they paid him a lot, I thought he would be more in the offense even after OBJ got hurt. Kind of was similar in terms of production. I would put him in the good starter tier. We didn't go over the tiers first. Let me just say we have best in the game, great starters, good starters, average starters, and then trash. I'd put Hooper in the good starters tier because I don't think he's great, but I don't think he's some scrub either.
Yeah, I agree with that. Speaking as a guy who likes the Browns, I was actually really excited when we signed Austin Hooper last offseason, just because I thought he was very underrated for the Falcons. I thought he was a really solid tight end there. I know he had some injuries come up in 2019, but overall he was really good that year. And then, yeah, like you said, he was very underwhelming in 2020. So if you kind of really good in 2019, not great in 2020, it kind of levels out into a good starter. So yeah, I have really no complaints there with where you slotted Austin Hooper at. So I'll jump in now to Chris Herndon. I mean, I feel like he's just an average guy. Personally, I think he could potentially move up a little bit. He had some nice games last year. But yeah, I mean, we're talking about Austin Hooper like he's some great guy, but I don't really view him as the same level of Austin Hooper. I think Austin Hooper's better than Herndon. But I don't think he's a trash tight end. I think he's probably more towards the top end of the average starters for tight ends. But yeah, Herndon, he's not like a dynamic, not a big guy, not a huge, big name tight end, but he's still solid. He's still decent. He had a kind of a tough start to his career, but he's kind of turned on around a little bit. So I'm going to put him in the average starter tier. Where do you think, Roman?
No, I completely agree. And I do think he has a little bit more potential now that they have Robert Saleh. I mean, I don't think Herndon is going to be used in the same way Kittle was in San Francisco, but if he has any sort of rub off potentially on Herndon, I think he'll be able to be a solid tight end and elevate his status. Definitely a sleeper in fantasy football this year, I'll just say.
Yeah, that is true. Especially like you said with Zach Wilson there, I think he could be decent. But yeah, not too much to add. I think we talked about Chris Herndon enough for one episode, so we'll jump in now to CJ. I think it's Uzoma. I can never pronounce his last name right, but it's over to you, Roman.
Yeah, I think the Bengals had terrible production out of the tight end position, even with Drew Sample, who I thought was the number 1 tight end. I don't know why the tier list didn't have him on here. But for those reasons, I'm just going to put him in the trash tier because I don't think he'll be very relevant in the next season. Now they have Jamar Chase. I know that he's a wide receiver and Uzama's a tight end, but there are more targets that are going to go to him than the rest of the tight end position. And I think the Bengals could have been on a guy like Hunter Henry or Jonnu Smith. Unfortunately, they didn't get any of those guys, and they'll have to roll with either him and Sample. But overall, I don't think he'll be very good this year.
I mean, he did have an injury last year, so he didn't play as much. He wasn't like awful, but I do agree. I think Drew Sample, I think this is he's entering his 3rd year, I believe, in the league. And it does sound like he's more the tight end of the future if they don't, like you've mentioned, sign a guy or trade for a guy. I feel like trash is kind of harsh just because he wasn't awful last year before the injury. We can leave him there for right now and kind of just see how the tiers shake out. I wouldn't mind moving him up to average starter, but we'll just kind of have to see because I do think Herndon's better than CJ. But yeah, I feel like a little too harsh on CJ a little bit, but we'll have to wait and see. Like I said, how the tier list shakes out. All right, so now I got Cole Comet. Last year was his rookie year. I mean, he had some flashes, but there was also some times where he was outshone by Jimmy Graham, who's like 55 years old now. So that's somewhat concerning, but kind of similar to Herndon and maybe even to a greater extent. He is still very young, so he definitely still has a lot of potential to move up and be better. I This is tough. I think I'm going to put him in front of Chris Herndon on the average starter tier. If we move him up to good starters, like at the back end, I wouldn't be upset about that. I just think maybe if we had like an unproven section, I think that's where you'd throw Cole Komet in. But I think, yeah, for right now, from what we know, he's average, but he could definitely be moved up, especially now with Justin Fields there as the quarterback in Chicago. Or even if Andy Dalton started, that's still an upgrade from what they had last year.
Yeah, I think Comet will actually be pretty good to great. I mean, eventually, but it's been a common trend that tight ends aren't very good in their first season. So I can
Yeah,
understand you putting him in the average tier, although we expect him to be much better than that. But
exactly.
leaving him in average, I don't have any problem with.
Yeah, I 100% agree with your take there. Now we'll jump into one of my personal favorite tight ends because of fantasy purposes, Mr. Dallas Goedert.
Yeah, he's been a riser the past couple of years, especially if Zach Ertz leaves. He'll be, solidified as a tight end one. Um, I think he'll can probably be maybe the fifth tight end off the board, perhaps fifth, sixth tight end off the board in fantasy drafts. I do think there's a lot of upside there. Um, I'm going to put him in good, but I don't know if you want to put him above or below Hooper. We can put him above.
I would say definitely above Hooper. This is tough because we're going to have to see how the sport shakes out. Because I feel like depending on who's in that great tier, you could
Yeah.
make an argument that Goddard could be the back end of great, but
I
there is still some unprovenness there,
yeah.
and we're
I just
more
want
looking
to
at like the potential. Yeah,
yeah, I want to see him do it again for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. And he did have some injuries last year,
Hmm.
and he hasn't like even though Zach Ertz has been a shell of himself here these past couple seasons. Um, Goddard, he still Ertz still kind of drew some of the game plan towards him. Goddard never has been that like bona fide number one guy. So there's some little unknown there, but yeah. So we'll probably leave him in good. But he definitely could be a great, maybe not best in the game. That's a little crazy, but yeah, he's definitely a really good player in my opinion. But now we got Dalton Schultz, who I mean he was okay last year. And I think honestly, like if we put Austin Hooper in the good, I think I'm going to put Dalton Schultz right behind Dallas Goedert in front of Austin Hooper. I mean, he had some flashes last year where he was decent. There is some concern there where he was with Blake Jarwin coming back from the injury, but there's also some maybe if Schultz gets that starting job, he Dak Prescott's coming back from injury, so he could have another nice season. So yeah, and he was like the one guy too that I felt like when Andy Dalton took over there at quarterback after the Dak injury, Schultz was the one guy as in the offense as a whole that didn't really fall off completely. So I think there's something to be said for that too. So yeah, I think he's just a solid, good starter. If you want to move him down the average, I'm not going to be like bang on the table, but I think he's a solid guy, and I think he's better than maybe some of those other guys we would throw in that average starter tier.
If we kept him in good, I think I want to put him behind Hooper just because I think Hooper
Okay.
has done it for more consistently as opposed to Schultz, who kind of had some luck with the Jarwin injury. And I expect Jarwin to fully take over back into his tight end one role that he had before his injury. But like you said, he did, do good once he had the opportunity, but I'd rather put him behind Hooper.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. I'm okay with that. Like I said, I just think it sucks because I feel like if Jarwin didn't get the injury, we'd be having the same exact conversation about Blake Jarwin. But Schultz, he made the most of his opportunity, regardless
Hmm.
of who was playing quarterback. So I think he deserves to be rewarded for that on our tier list. But you got Mr. Dan Arnold now.
It's an interesting player because he kind of banked on himself having a good year with the Cardinals, and now he's signed with the Panthers. I don't know if you saw this video, Drew, but there was like some behind the scenes footage of his agent talking to Carolina. It was interesting kind of seeing the behind the scenes working of that contract being coming into fruition.
Yeah, I
I
love
do,
videos like that.
yeah, I do think he's actually pretty decent, but I think I don't know. I think he'll be actually good in Carolina amongst the other weapons that they have, so he might be a little bit of an afterthought. I'd put him either top of average or last of good. I'll leave that up to you.
I'm gonna put him in the top of average. because I feel like there's some other guys we'll put in the good tier that are just better than him. And
Hmm.
I think uh, just looking at the faces, I feel like he fits in more with Comet and Herndon than he does with the other three guys in the good tier currently. Yeah, I think he's a solid guy. Uh, Room to grow too, so he could easily be a good guy, especially now with the kind of maybe more expanded opportunities or at least less coverage on him. And Sam Darnold too. I mean, I know he's kind of downgrading from Kyler to Sam, but by all accounts, Sam Darnold is like amazing in practice and stuff. So who knows? Maybe Dan Arnold's due for a really big year. But I think for right now, I would put him in the top end of the average starters. So now I'll do David Njoku. This is a guy who I feel like every single season, every single offseason, it's he's done. He's getting traded from Cleveland. He's getting traded, and then he never gets traded. And that happened again this year because now he's on a winning team, and it seems like he's kind of happy about that. And this is a tough, tough guy because he's like the potential has always been there with him. He always shows some flashes, but then he also just doesn't play well, or he doesn't play at all because you just can't trust him that much. Um, Man, I don't think I'm going to put him in the good starters just because he didn't play. He wasn't really even a starter last year. I think I'm going to put him behind Chris Herndon in the average starters. You could even maybe put him in the trash. I don't feel like I can put him in the trash just because the potential is still there, even though he doesn't really play that much. And maybe if he eventually does get traded from Cleveland, or if he becomes the bona fide guy there in Cleveland, maybe he can finally deliver on some of that potential. But I'm going to put him right there for right now.
Well, I do think the three guys ahead of Njoku in the average tier have more upside, I would say, at this point. I think what we've seen out of Njoku when he did have the opportunity, he wasn't actually that bad. And it's unfortunate because the tight end position in Cleveland, it's been pretty crowded, obviously, with Hooper and
Yeah,
Njoku and
that's
even
true.
Harrison Bryant, who's actually been pretty decent. And like you said, there was a lot of drama with trade talks. He requested trade, but it never happened. Um, from what I mentioned earlier, his opportunity once he's had that, I mean, I think he's been pretty decent. He had some injury concerns. Me personally, I would put him at the top of average, but I understand your point as he has the less upside and he's uh, kind of straggling in the dust there.
Yeah, and I believe he had some issues with drops too, if I remember
Hmm.
correctly, which is a little concerning. I guess we can just even it out, and we can we'll put him
We
in
can put him
front of
behind
Komet
Commit. Oh,
or
okay.
behind Komet. Sure, we'll put him behind Komet. 'Cause I mean, I feel like those guys are all kind of interchangeable for the most part. They all have their own
Sure.
concerns. They're not complete trash either. So yeah, I think that's good. Leave him right there. But I'll hand it over to you now for Dawson Knox.
Yeah, Dawson Knox. I think he had a great connection with Josh Allen last year. He's fairly young. I think in his first couple of years, this could be his second year, correct, or maybe his third. I don't remember.
Second or third year. I don't know.
Yeah, something like
I'd look
that.
that too.
But either way, I think he's a very young guy with a lot of potential. I don't know if he's a good starter yet, since there was some interchangeability with other tight ends on the team last year, such as Tyler Croft and other guys like that. So I'm putting him at the top of average, but I don't think it'll be very long until we see him, fully fledged into the offense as a starter.
Yeah, so this will be his third year. So he's entering his third year. He's played 2 years in the NFL. Honestly, like, yeah, I guess he's kind of in the same trap as guys like the other guys we have in the average tier, where we just the sample size is small. Um, yeah, because he had under 300 yards receiving last year. I don't know. I think I agree with your take. I think he was good last year, but there's also we don't really know a lot just because his ceiling is still like unproven, just because he's not been the number one guy. But I think yeah, definitely because the potential's there. He's definitely going to be a good to great guy very very soon, in my
Yeah, he's
opinion.
fun to
Especially if he
watch
can keep
too.
if he keeps that strong like relationship with Josh Allen too. The sky's the limit for the sky's the limit, at least to the extent it is for tight ends for Dawson Knox in the NFL. All right, so so happy I got this clown, Eric Ebron, the guy who claims that Detroit's not still in his head, but yet he tweets about us literally every chance he gets.
He's rattled.
Brick hand. So he had a really good. This is a little tangent here, but I remember it had to be it was a few Halloweens ago I was at a Halloween thing in the Metro Detroit area, and there was a person dressed up as Eric Ebron, and he had bricks on his hands, and he was wearing like an Ebron jersey. There was like a picture of it going around too. I don't know if you ever saw it, but it was quite funny. I loved it. So anyway, I might be biased on this because I don't like Eric Ebron, but wait, another waste of a top 10 pick. Anyway, he was really good 2 years ago for the Colts, and last year for the Steelers, he was decent. I mean, I would say I think he belongs in the good tier. We can probably put him. I'm going to put him right here in front of Austin Hooper. I think that's where he belongs because he is more proven than the guys in the average tier. He did have some solid moments last year, even though it was a step back from his time in Indianapolis. If I'm being unbiased, that's where I think he belongs, even though you're giving me that look, Roman, and you might want to move him down a little bit, which I'd be okay with. But I think in the good starters tier is where Eric belongs.
If we were biased, which I hope won't be, if we were biased, we put him in the trash tier right away. I think we can
Yeah.
agree on that. But on a non-biased perspective, I don't think his one good year in Indianapolis can justify being above a guy like Hooper or even in the good tier entirely. I think he fell off in Pittsburgh, and since they got Pat Freiermuth, I don't think it'll be much longer until he's on another
True.
team.
That's a good point.
Should he go in trash? Probably not, but I think we can put him at the top of average or something like that.
I think that's where we're gonna move him. I think I forgot about the baby Gronk that they drafted him. That was the second round, I think, right? Second or third round. That's a
Second round.
decently high. So that means they're gonna want to play him, especially with this might be Big Ben's last ride. They're gonna want to put the best guys out there, regardless of experience. So, and obviously, if they took a tight end that early, they obviously don't like Ebron that much. So, yes, I'm gonna move him down the average. I did forget about the Freiermuth connection. So yeah, so I think, but I think that's where he belongs. Yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. Now we got Evan Ingram.
The fact that this man made the Pro Bowl last year is beyond me. I think he was one of the worst tight ends in football. I think even Chris, he's not on here, but if he was on here, he would agree with me.
Yeah, he hates it.
Yeah, justifiably so. I just want to put him in the trash tier and kind of move on. Does he have some tools? Has he produced a little bit? Sure, but I don't think his upside is going up anytime soon, and I think we should just leave him in there and move on.
I mean, what? I mean, yeah. Does he drop some passes?
Yes.
But like, I don't know. Like, is he really like? Does he belong in the trash tier? I mean, that seems a little bit kind of crazy. I mean, he had over 600 yards reception last year.
Is he the worst tight end in the NFL? No, but I think just in purposes of like trajectory, and he's going absolutely downhill. I'm sorry, Giants fans, if you're listening, but there's no way if you can justify him being in the Pro Bowl, fine. But I don't think he should have been. I think they're more deserving tight ends, and ultimately, I mean, hopefully he has a bounce back year because he needs one. But I mean, he's disappointed a lot of people, and I think I'd take everyone above. I'd take everyone in the average tier over him. That's what I think.
Well, I think maybe because he was a decently high draft pick. I think he has obviously had a lot of potential. We were really kind of expecting a lot from him when he came out of college, and he never delivered on that. But I think that's why we think he's so bad because we expected him to be a better tight end than he is. But I don't know. I'm moving him out of the trash tier. I would probably put him in the top end of the average, just because I still think he has some potential. But since you said to put him in the back end, I'll put him right directly in the middle of the average tier, right there. I would even I feel like some people, because he was a Pro Bowler last year, somehow he only had one touchdown too. I did not realize he only had one receiving touchdown last year. Because he was a Pro Bowler last year, though, they'd probably put him in the good starter tier. I would say maybe, or maybe even the great starter tier, depending on what your feelings are. So I don't think he's that good. But I do think he's not a lost cause completely, and I think maybe some of our judgment is clouded because we expected so much more from him and he didn't deliver. But that doesn't mean he's like a complete trash tight end. That's at least my opinion. But yeah,
I wouldn't take him in fantasy.
Yeah, especially because he's a guy that goes kind of early too. I know last year he was like a top 5 tight end, I think, off the boards. there's a lot of times too where I saw he'd go before guys like T.J. Hawkinson too.
Yeah,
Just
that's
because
stupid.
Hawk wasn't as big of a guy last year, but this year he's probably a little bit lower. But um, yeah, I think I had him. We did a mock. I think I had him as my backup tight end. And if he's your backup tight end, I'm living with that. That's pretty nice. Anyway, okay, so now we got Gronk. We mentioned baby Gronk a few minutes ago. Now we got big Gronk, Rob Gronkowski. He's old, obviously, but he was really good last year in the Super Bowl at least. Every other game he'd kind of have like he'd be. I mean, he was pretty good there down the stretch too. I mean, I'm going to put him in the great starters tier just because I don't know how many other guys we're going to put in that tier. And I think Gronk is better than Goddard, Hooper, and Schultz. Obviously, maybe there's some bias here because his career's been so great. But I think back into the great starters tier is where he belongs. He really kind of, it seemed like once he kind of got a grasp of the offense and once he kind of got back in the groove of playing NFL football, he had a really solid year last year down the stretch. And then he was also big in the playoffs, like I said. So yeah, I think he's a back end great starter still. Now, could he get injured this year? Could his age start really showing? Yes, but I think right now I'd say he's a back end great tight end, especially when you look at some of the other guys on this list. But that's at least my case. If you want to move him down to good, I'll live with it. But I think just looking at some of these guys we have left, I would take Gronk in that great tier for sure.
No, I don't have a problem with where you put him. Like you mentioned, he came on strong down the stretch and into the playoffs and the Super Bowl as well. Does he have the upside like some of the guys below him? Probably not
Yeah,
as much
absolutely. Yeah.
anymore. In terms of fantasy, I think you'd see Goddard go much earlier than a Gronk would. Gronk went so late in drafts last year. I think he'll rise a little bit, but not as much to the extent of him going being the fourth, fifth tight end off the board. But I do think he'll be good again this year, since they're bringing back literally everyone from that team. And I think great is justified. I think he'll probably be towards the back half of great once the tier
Yeah.
list is done. But overall, I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah, and you mentioned fantasy too. I mean, last year, at least in some of the drafts that I was in, it was either Gronk went super early because it's Gronk and everybody
Yeah.
wanted Gronk and he's a big name, or he went super late because everybody thought he was washed up. Um,
hmm
so yeah, there was no. I think this year though he's probably going to go more like in the middle of that. It's not going to be the two extremes. But yeah, I'm glad. I thought that was a controversial take, so I'm glad you agreed with me on that. But now we've got who's that?
Hayden
Hayden Hurst.
Hurst. This man was supposed to go off, supposed to break out in 2020, but absolutely did not.
Yes.
Many people were hyping him up as the next breakout tight end of the season. I drafted him in one of my leagues, ended up trading him because he was not great for me. However, I mean, he's fairly old. When he was drafted, he was considerably older, I think, than other draft prospects. Um, but I do think he has something left in the tank. I think he has more to prove. I think he'll actually be pretty decent this year. I'm gonna put him in good, right, right in front of Hooper. That's where I think he'll go.
Yeah, I think I agree with that.
Well, not to
Yeah,
mention now that they have Pitts, and he'll probably not be
yeah.
as relevant. But so yeah, I don't think he'll be as good as he could have been. But come to think of it, yeah, that's fine.
But they also don't have Julio anymore.
Right.
So they could run a lot of two tight end sets. They could do a lot of the stuff that they're doing with out of New England with Henry and Jonnu. So that's potentially. But yeah, I think you put him in the perfect spot right there behind Goddard. He was It was kind of the same thing with Evan Ingram last year. I think if we would have tempered our expectations a little bit, we would have been like, okay, he's not that bad. But just because we expected so much from him, and
hmm
then he didn't deliver on those expectations, like you said, it was disappointing. But yeah, I think he's still not an awful player. I think he's better than all those guys in the average tier for sure. And I think right there in the good starters tier is right where he belongs. So good take there, Roman.
Thank you.
All right, so now we got Hunter Henry. I mean, this is tough because I feel like I think Chris doesn't like him. So if he was on this show, he'd have a different opinion. But I feel like he's right on that border of great and good. I feel like he's right on that edge. Um, and I'm looking at some of these other guys that we're probably gonna put in the great tier, and I just don't think Hunter Henry is there. So I think I'm gonna put him as the first guy in the good tier, because he's decent, he's solid. If you want to move him into the great tier, I'm okay with that. But I think he's a good tight end. I think he's better than all those guys behind him. But again, like I said, I don't know if he's better than some of those guys we're probably going to end up putting in the great tier. But what do you think?
No, I'd leave him right where you put him. I think he was good in the LA. However, I think we have to take everything with a grain of salt because you never know how things will go in New England. Considering they also have Jonnu Smith. Um, it was kind of crazy how they were signing both of them. Doesn't really
Yeah,
make sense. Does it? Does it not? We'll have to see. Hopefully, it pays off for him. But overall, I think he's a good tight end. I think he can actually be better than that, like you kind of alluded to. But for right now, I think top good is a good spot for him.
yeah. I think if he gets the opportunity there, if Mac Jones is as good as some of the training OTA highlights I've seen, and or even if Cam Newton is able to get a little bit better, I think he could have a solid season. But again, he's going down. He's coming off of having Justin Herbert as his quarterback, and I think unless Mac is like really good, like Herbert was last year in his rookie year, or if Cam is like almost MVP level Cam, it's going to be a downgrade for sure. So we might see a little fall off, but there's also a chance that we could see some uprising potential. But now you got Jack Doyle here next up.
I think Jack Doyle has been pretty consistent throughout his NFL career, especially these past couple of seasons, and even during Ebron's breakout year with the Colts. I think Doyle still had a good season
Yeah.
by all accounts. I know they've had some other tight ends in and out of there, Trey Burton, Moelle Cox, something like some other guys, but I think he's been able to keep consistent through all of that. I'm going to put him in the good tier. I think I'm going to put him right behind Hooper.
Yeah, I don't really have too much to add. I think that's right around where I'd put him. I maybe would put him behind. No, I'd put him right there. Um, yeah, I don't really have too much to add. I think he's an average, solid guy. He's not like borderline trash like some of the guys we have in the average tier. Yeah, he's just a good, solid tight end. So, yeah, I think that's the perfect spot. I don't have too much to add, and he's also another guy who could potentially move up a little bit because he's got Carson Wentz now at
Hmm.
quarterback, and if Wentz is as good as maybe we expect him, at least I expect him to be, hopefully.
Me too.
Um, he could have a really big season because I mean Philip Rivers wasn't bad last year, but I remember when he had Andrew Luck that he had some really nice seasons. And Wentz could maybe be that guy too. But now we got Jared Cook, who is older for sure, and I feel like he's just an average starter. I know he had those like costly drops last year for the Saints in the playoffs.
Yep.
That it didn't cost them the game, but it definitely didn't help. So I think I'm going to put him in the average starters tier. I think I'm gonna. I mean, I don't know where to put him. I think I'm gonna put him right here. I think because he was still solid last year. He wasn't awful, but he is older, and I definitely think he is like a lot of these guys behind him in the average tier are definitely probably going to pass him at the end of 2021. I don't see Cook moving up anytime soon, but I still think he's an average guy. I think. What do you think?
I would leave him where you put him. I think you have
Okay,
to remember that, while he was costly with a lot of drops with an older Drew Brees, he's now going to
yeah,
another great situation with a young Justin Herbert, kind of
true.
filling in where Hunter Henry was. He'll be the starter by default. And if he can at least garner any ounce of what he used to be, I think he'll be in a good spot. They'll obviously have more weapons on that team, but I think he'll fit in. But I'm not going to put him in good. I think he'll just be average.
Yeah, okay. I agree with that. I wasn't sure if I was like too high or too low on him. He's a difficult guy to do because kind of like Gronk, he's been good in the past, but it's hard to kind of gauge where he's at now. So yeah, average good. And you even kind of started talking me into maybe moving him up to good, but we'll leave him in average for right now. But now you have Jonnu Smith.
Yeah, similarly to Henry, they're both going to the same situation. I really couldn't tell you how that split is going to work unless they're going to be both on the field at the same time. They both Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith got a huge contract. Jonnu Smith was very useful in Tennessee, especially since they didn't have that number two wide receiver at the time, unless you count Corey Davis, but I know Chris wouldn't. But I think he'll actually be pretty decent. I'm not going to say he's great. I'm going to put him in the good tier, but I'm going to put him behind Dallas Goedert, I think, just because of
Yeah,
upside, and you don't really know what to expect with the Patriots just yet.
Yeah, I do. I wish Chris was here just because I remember I said before when we were talking about the Julio trade, I said something like, "Oh, they have to replace Jonnu Smith and Corey Davis's," and he kind of got offended by saying that. So I don't know if that means he doesn't like Jonnu Smith that much, but I
He
think if you
has
look
him
at the
in
tight ends,
fantasy.
yeah, that's true. I think if you look at the tight ends, though, I think yeah, Jonnu's right there. He had a really nice season last year. He kind of tailed. He had like a really hot start, and then he kind of tailed off a little bit. But I think having him in like the same area as Hunter Henry, but slightly below, is perfect. As they are now teammates there in New England. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
I would put him right there too. Good take there, Roman. Um, Now I have Jordan Akins here. I'll be honest, I don't have a ton of hot Jordan Akins takes. I think I think he was solid last year. I brought his stats up just so I had a better frame of mind as I think about this. He had 400 reception yards and 1 touchdown. Not great. I'm tempted to put him in just in the trash tier, but at the same time, I don't think it was awful. But there's also some concerns of who's going to play quarterback there in Houston. So I think I'm going to put him at the last guy in the average starters tier because his stats are pretty comparable to a lot of the other guys we have there in the average starters. And I think he's better than CJ. I do believe he's still relatively. I know he's older, so maybe he could potentially move up a little bit, but not probably not a ton. So I'm going to leave him right there. Would you have any takes on that?
No, I'd leave him where you put him. He was, I think, startable at least a couple of times last year for fantasy, similar to Darren Fells in Houston. Either one of them could have had some decent games over the course of the year. However, with the quarterback confusion, I don't think he'll be very fantasy relevant or even in real life relevant. Um, but since they have black weapons, they do have Brevin Jordan now, so I think maybe he'll kind of step in right away as a tight end one. But I'm not going to argue where you put him.
Okay, sounds good. Let's move into a different tight end, a little bit better than Jordan Akins, I think. George Kittle.
Do we really need to talk about this one? Just move him to the top of the tier list and let's move on.
Couldn't agree more. Obviously, I got the jersey on. He's definitely my favorite non-quarterback in the game right now. I just love this guy so much. I got my Barstool head on too because he does a lot of stuff with Barstool now. He's on Bussin' with the Boys and all that stuff. So um, yeah, and he also was giving some shout outs to Dan Campbell too, talking about how great of a coach
No,
he is and
yeah.
how he likes his energy. So maybe and he was on Bussin' with the Boys with TJ Hawkinson. I mean, should I buy a George Kittle Lions jersey right now or should I wait? Was he coming here? What? I'm just kidding. But yeah, he's also got whether it's Trey Lance or Jimmy G starting at quarterback. That's a definite upgrade from what they had last year. If hopefully, as long as he can stay healthy, because injuries are a concern with Kittle, because he just like loves to block and he's just a gamer. He's gonna have another monster year. In my opinion.
We'll have to debate about it later whether he's actually number one or number two in the best of the tier list, but we'll see when we get there.
Yeah, I mean, you know where I would put him, but I think if I'm not biased, he might be number two. But we'll wait. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Now we got Kyle Rudolph, who again, if we're going by in career, definitely, yeah, he's had a great career. It was really big there in Minnesota for a while, and now he's in New York, right? Yeah,
The
he's in New York
Giants,
with the
yep.
Giants, right? Um, so there's some concern there. Is he going to play with Evan Ingram? How's that going to work? And I think because that with Evan Ingram and everything going on there, I think I'm going to put him right here behind Evan Ingram. Actually, I don't even think he belongs there. I think he's worse than that. I'll put him right here because I don't think he's complete trash. He had some moments last year, but at this point in his career, he's not good anymore. Sorry, he could have he could have some moments for New York and maybe move up and prove me wrong, but he's just on the back end of his career, and I would put him in the back end of the average starters tier. Again, not complete trash. I feel bad for CJ because he's our only trash tight end, but I'm going to put him there in the back end of the average tier.
No, yeah, I agree. I don't really know what his role is going to be with New York, considering that they do have other weapons. They brought in Tony, they brought in Galladay. They'll have Saquon back. So who knows how long he'll be with them? Maybe he even retires halfway through the season. Who knows? But yeah, I'm not going to argue where you put him. And I think I'd rather take everyone above him as well over.
Yeah, I mean he had 600 reception yards in 2018, then it went down to about 400 in 2019, and it went down to about 300 in 2020. So
Yeah,
he's
well,
on the tail end of his
that was
career.
also because of Irv Smith, who unfortunately isn't even on this list, but we'll probably talk about him a little later.
Yeah, yeah. Um, we can talk about right now. Let's talk about right now. I would put him in the good tier if we're talking about Irv Smith, and I think he could even potentially move up. Um, yeah, I don't know why. This is a pretty solid tier list, but I don't know why they forgot Irv Smith. But yeah, where would you put Irv Smith real quick? Since we're talking Minnesota tight ends.
Yeah, I'd put him above probably Jack Doyle, I'd say, but
Yeah,
obviously has more upside as well.
yeah, and I think he definitely could be a great starter here very soon. All right, I'm glad we kind of got that Irv Smith tangent. We covered that. Now we'll jump into Logan Thomas.
Yeah, I think he's good. I think he was very underrated last year, and considering that he's still in a place where in Washington where there's no other I guess competition at the tight end position, he might be good. And be good again, as in keeping that momentum he had from last year. I know that Chris and even you, Drew, were kind of hyping him up in our fantasy draft not too long ago. Um, Dare I put him at the top of good? I'm not sure, but I think you'll see guys behind him, as in like Goddard. I think he'll go earlier in terms of fantasy drafts. However, Logan Thomas will definitely be viable again. Where do you want to put him in the good tier? Because I think he definitely belongs in there.
I'd put him. Yeah, I'd put him. I can't put him in the front. I can. Yeah, I'll put him right there in the front, in front of Hunter Henry. I think Logan Thomas was extremely underrated last year, especially with. I mean, Alex Smith. I know it's hard to kind of criticize Alex Smith because he was even playing football. That's awesome, but he was playing on one leg basically, and now he gets a quarterback upgrade. I would say in Ryan Fitzpatrick or even Taylor Heineke, who was another solid quarterback. At least in one game, he was solid. So I think regardless, he's going to see a bigger season. And yeah, I know this isn't a fantasy episode, but like Logan Thomas is not a big name. In our dynasty league, I got him pretty late, and he's still projected to get like 12 to 15 points, which is really nice for a tight end. So yeah, I love Logan Thomas, like you said before. I believe Chris is high on him too. And I think yeah, he's a little bit on the older side. I think he's 29.
I think he might be
Um,
30 actually.
maybe he's 30 now too. So that's a little concerning because a lot of times you see these guys that they kind of burst out on the scene. They're younger, but he is on the older side, so we could see some regression. But
Oh,
um,
he's 29.
he's 29. Okay. So yeah, he's probably still got a few good years left in him, at least in terms of football. So I think he could be a great starter. I think you could even make the argument he's a great starter right now. Um, but obviously it was only 1 year sample size, so that's a little bit maybe a little bit of aggressive to put him in the great starter tier. But so I think top end of good is the perfect spot for him right now. Now speaking of great starters, we got Mark Andrews. I'm gonna put him in the great tier ahead of Gronk. I think he's a really great tight end, for lack of a better term. It seems like a lot of the receivers there in Baltimore who have struggled to kind of find a rhythm with Lamar. Mark is the one guy who hasn't really had struggles finding that rhythm. Been really solid the last few years with Lamar, and I think he's gonna have another solid year next. And yeah, I think he's definitely better than all those guys in the good tier, and he's not as good as George Kittle and another guy we'll talk about here in a second. But he is definitely top end of great in my opinion.
Yeah, and even with the additions of Bateman and Wallace, I don't think it'll make a difference in terms of his output. Many people thought he would decline last year, which I guess is fair considering that the Ravens aren't always a passing team; they run first, as we all know. So even throughout that, he's been able to keep consistent, and he definitely belongs to the top of the great tier.
Cool. Yeah, glad you agree. We'll jump in now to Mike Gesicki.
Yeah, this is a guy who I had high hopes for last year, but kind of underperformed. And even going into this season, I don't think he'll be able to have the same opportunity considering they signed Will Fuller, they brought in Waddle, they drafted another tight end in Hunter Long, who, although he won't be the starter, I think all those weapons that they added will take away from him. And who knows where Tua is at in terms of his progression. Many saying he's good, but he also threw 5 picks in training camp or in practice the other day. So who knows where he's really at. I'm gonna put him in good just because I think he's, I think that's the definition of average with upside. However, I'm gonna put him right behind Jonnu Smith.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably would have put him behind Hayden Hurst, um, or even possibly behind Jack Doyle. I mean, yeah, but he's right there in that range. I'm not gonna like we're not going to get into a fight about where we're putting Mike Gesicki, but yeah, I think he's a good guy. He does have some upside. like you said, he was kind of disappointing last year. He was very like kind of hit or miss. He'd either have like a huge game or he'd be non-existent. So maybe finding some more consistency would be key for him coming into 2021. But yeah, I think he belongs right there with those guys. He did prove a little bit last year. And yeah, I think he's better than those guys in the average tier who are still either on the back half of their career or about to lose their jobs or unproven. So yeah, I think Gesicki right there in the middle of the good tier is a perfect spot for him. All right, so now we got Noah Fant. For me, oh man, he was really good last year, I thought. Possibly great, some might say. Before he went down with the injuries, and then he was kind of inconsistent there down the stretch. I think I'm gonna put him in the good tier. We're being really kind of stingy here with these tight ends. I like it, and it's a tough tier list to do. But I think I'm gonna put him. I'm gonna put him. I'm gonna put him right here, and I think he definitely has the potential to move up, for sure. I think him falling back. It's hard to tell. It's hard to see that happening. As long as he stays healthy. I mean, I think he's a really solid young tight end, and he's still very unproven. And I think even if especially if the Broncos get Aaron Rodgers, we could see a big year for Noah Fant. As long as he stays healthy, like I said, that's a big concern with him. But yeah, I think he's a good starter. But definitely great upside, I think.
Yeah, I don't mind where you put him. However, I do think this placement might dictate a place of a similar tight end, another Iowa tight end that we'll probably talk about in a little bit. I think they're both very similar, and obviously they're in the same draft class. However, Noah Fant, I agree with everything you said. I do think he has the upside similar to Goddard. Well, I do think Fant and Goddard have more upside than a guy like Henry and Thomas. I think, in terms of where they were at last year, this
Yeah.
makes sense as to where to put him.
Yeah, and I do have that other Iowa tight end with my next thing, and I will say I do not agree with your take that they are similar. So we'll just leave that as a tease.
Well, I feel like I said that is in the sense that I feel like that would be a possibility. However, if I was reading it, it would be different, but we'll see.
Okay, so we might be in agreement, but we'll have to wait and see. But before we get into that, we have to do Mr. Bobby Tonyan here. So how about you go and pick where are you going to put him?
Well, this is the tight end that should have made the Pro Bowl over Evan Ingram. Let's just say that. He had a great season. Will he replicate it? I guess depending on who the quarterback is. If it's Jordan Love, maybe not. If it's Rodgers, then probably. I'm going to put him at the top of good. I don't think I'd put him in great just yet since I want to see him do it again. Similar to Logan Thomas, we need to see him do it again. But I think that Tunion's year was more impressive than Logan Thomas's.
Yeah, I feel like Logan Thomas, it seemed like he kind of came on at the end. Tonyan was pretty consistent for much of the year. So I agree with that. He's still kind of unproven, so that's why I don't think he belongs in the great tier yet. Especially if Rodgers is gone, he's kind of in that same boat with Noah Fant, where Aaron Rodgers, their fate lies in Aaron Rodgers' hands and where he ends up. So we'll have to wait and see there because I think he could fall back a little bit, or not if Rodgers is gone and then just a fire sale and everybody leaves and Robert Tonyan's the last man standing. Maybe he'll either get traded and get into a better situation, or he'll be in a good situation, get a lot of targets there in Green Bay. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I think top end of good is great for him. And now we'll do TJ Hawkinson, who, I think he was great last year. And I think he belongs. This might be controversial, and we might come off as biased here, but I'm going to put him right here. I think he had a really great season. He was a Pro Bowler last year, and he stayed healthy. He had, like I said, he had a monster season. I think he could even have a bigger season this year as long as he stays on the field, given the lack of other receiving options with the Lions. And I know Jared Goff is not Matthew Stafford. I get it, but he's still not I don't agree with the take that he's a garbage quarterback. So we'll have to wait and see. But I think Hawkinson, he's not as good as Mark Andrews, but I would say he's better than Gronk, at least in this point in his career. He still has a lot of upside as well. And I think he's better than all those guys we have in the good tier for sure.
You see, if I put him there, I feel like I would get a lot of flack for it and be called a homer. But since you put him there, I completely agree. That's where I would have put him anyways. But I do think he's going to have a great season regardless of the quarterback. And I do think the lack of, notable offensive weapons will help him out considerably. I think Hawkinson will be Goff's #1 best friend. And yes, while we do have Perriman and Williams, who I don't think will be that big of a difference makers, you also have guys like Swift, Cephas, St. Brown, who I think will be very decent and relevant in our offense at least. I think Hawkinson will be, considerably far and away the best weapon on the team. So I'm glad we put him there.
Yeah, I think he's very deserving of it, and hopefully, it doesn't come off as us being a bunch of homers. But you got, I don't know how you did this, but you pulled it off. You got the two best tight ends. This should not warrant a lot of discussion, but where are you going to put Travis Kelce?
Me personally, I would have him number 2 behind George Kittle.
Wow.
I just think Kittle can do it all. I think he can block, run. He has more agility, I believe, and Kittle's done more with less at the quarterback position.
True.
While Kittle has had Mahomes for most of his career. I know many people. That's maybe not a popular take. I'm sure you'd put Kittle behind Kelce,
I would, yeah.
but I truly believe Kittle might be the best tight end in the league.
I mean, I got the Kittle jersey on, so I'm not moving him since you put him there.
Yeah,
But yeah, I personally would probably. This is why I guess we need Chris here to kind of break the tie. But I would put Kelce ahead of Kittle. But like you said, Kelce, he gets a lot of that praise because he's more of a receiver than like an actual tight end. Tight end. He's obviously not as good of a blocker as Kittle, but he can stay on the field better than Kittle can,
that's true.
potentially because he's not blocking as much. But yeah, I mean they're very like 1A, 1B in my opinion. But yeah, we'll
Yep.
put Kittle right there.
Both
We'll
have
leave
great
Kelce.
personalities as well.
Great personality, yeah, great guys that you'd love to hang out with. So yeah, but they're right there. They're 1A, 1B.
Hmm.
Wherever you put them, there's no complaints. But yeah, I think they're really good. And now we're going from the two best tight ends, possibly the third best tight end in the league right now, Mr. Tyler Eifert. Here we go. That's a great encore here. Okay, so him, he's had injuries. It sucks, but I think I'm gonna put him.
Do it.
Yeah, I'm gonna put him in trash. I mean, I don't want to hate on our Cincinnati Bengals fans because Eifert was obviously a former Cincinnati Bengal there for a while, but yeah, I think he's trash. He can't stay on the field well. I mean, I guess he's still in Jacksonville, right? He's still there,
Yeah,
I
I
think.
think so.
Um,
He'll be outshadowed by Tebow, though. Let's go.
yeah, I mean, yeah, if they're bringing Tebow in to take your job, I mean, there's got to be some issues there with your playing style, I guess. So yeah, I'm gonna put him in trash. Maybe a little harsh, but yeah, I just think that's where he belongs. I don't think we need to talk about him anymore. Let's do Tyler Higbee here, Roman.
I do like Tyler Higbee quite a bit. However, the Rams do have a lot of offensive weapons. They did lose Gerald Everett, so maybe that helps out Higbee a little bit. But I'm gonna put him in good, probably towards the back half. I think I'm gonna put him right behind Hooper, I'd say.
Yeah, I would probably put him in front of Hooper, but again, I'm not gonna going to argue about it. I agree with all your takes there on Higbee. He's just a good guy. He's a good starter. Um, and I think he could potentially, maybe like you said, Everett's gone. Maybe he gets more touches there. Stafford, we've seen before. He likes his tight ends, whether he's throwing to Ebron, who can't catch the ball, or he's throwing to a good one in Hawkinson. He loves trying to throw into those tight ends. Maybe Higbee kind of benefits from that. And I think that whole Rams offense as a whole is probably going to get at least a little bit of a boost with Stafford there, and maybe Higbee can kind of ride those coattails. But yeah, I
Mhm.
think that's a perfect spot for him, at least from what we know right now. All right, so I got Darren Waller. Finally, I guess I got the two, like the secondary good tight ends. You got the two top guys. I guess I got the 4 actually next guys. So I guess it kind of evens out a little bit, but I mean, I think Darren Waller. The Walrus is really, really good. I don't think he belongs in the same tier as Kelce and Kittle. I think those two guys are in a tier of their own. But I do think Waller is for sure the best guy of the rest, or the best guy in the great tier or the elite tier, or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, I think he's right there. I think he's better than Mark Andrews. He's better than Hawk. He's better than Gronk. So yeah, I'm gonna leave him right there in the great starters. What do you think?
He's definitely the third best tight end in the league. However, I think he's closer to Kittle Kelsey than he would be to
I
the rest
agree.
of the great tier.
I think I agree with
So
that.
a
Yeah.
part of me does want to put him in the elite tier with the other two guys, but just to make it look how it should be, I think we can leave him where he is.
He's kind of in a tier of his own. I feel like we
Yeah,
should make another one and add the Walrus, and it's just Darren Waller in there.
yeah,
Um,
right.
but yeah, I mean Mark Andrews isn't. I mean he's kind of with Waller, I feel like, but not really, I guess. Um, yeah, I guess you're right. He's kind of in a tier with zone. It's tough. But I just feel like it just looked weird. And maybe it's
Mm-hmm.
just aesthetically looking. It looked weird seeing Waller with Kittle and Kelsey.
Sure.
I think him being the top of the great very well could be though in that best in the game tier by the end of this season. But you can do the next. You got the next one.
Will Disley, baby, let's go. He's had some good spot starts. I think he's obviously injury prone as well. Who knows what his future trajectory is, considering that they have some other weapons on Seattle. Who knows if he'll even be the starter for Seattle going into the season. However, based off of what we've seen so far, I think he's better than average. However, I don't think he's done it more consistently. So I think I'd put him at the very end of good.
Yeah, I don't. I probably would put him in the top end of average, I would say, because he did have a lot of touchdowns last year, if I remember correctly. He was able to kind of find that nice connection there with Russell Wilson, but there are a lot of unknowns there with him because like Wilson might get traded, he might not play. It seems like that relationship might be a little bit better now. He might not even be the starter eventually, so I think that's why I would hesitate and put him more in the average tier. But Disley being in the back end of the good starter tier, it's fine. I'm not gonna get too upset about it. So, all right. So we got a nice, really intriguing guy for you to end the episode off. But now I have Zach Ertz, and it pains me to do this, but might be a hot take. But I'm putting him in the trash tier. He can't stay on the field. Actually, that's a little harsh. It's a little harsh. I'm gonna put him. I'm gonna put him ahead of Kyle Rudolph because I think both those guys are in very similar spots in their career. Formerly really great tight ends, but they're just on the back end of their careers now. Ertz especially, he's got a lot of injury concerns. I think he still wants to get traded. He hasn't been traded yet. That was one of the big like draft day trades I remember seeing. Like, oh, it's going to happen. It's going to happen on draft night, and that was 2 months ago now. So we'll have to wait and see there what happens with him. Who knows what team he'll be on? Maybe he'll retire. I don't know. A lot of unknowns there, but I think he belongs. You could even put him in the trash tier, and I wouldn't be too upset about it. But I think he belongs there in the back end of the average, based on the other guys we have in that tier.
I don't think he'll be with Philadelphia by the beginning of the season. However, I don't think there are many places where he'd be a starter. Um, I do think, I guess, similar to Rudolph, there is something left in the tank. We don't know how much, but I do think
Yeah,
he'll get some playing time, whether it's Philadelphia or elsewhere. So I don't think he's completely trash, but I don't think he has, left much left to prove, and I don't think he'll be very viable for fantasy purposes or for any team, unless he just somehow gets a second wind and blows everyone away. But I don't think he won't have high expectations for 2021.
yeah. I think we talked enough about Zach Ertz for one episode, like I said, for a couple of these guys. So over to you now for Kyle Pitts, our last guy of the episode.
I know Chris would probably want to put him in the great tier right away, but considering that he has not played a single game yet, I think he does. The expectations are high for sure. Will he be in the great tier by the end of the year? Sure. We'll see. I'm going to put him at the top of the good tier just because I think, if he can do it in 1 year, he'll be considered good. And similarly to Tunyon and Thomas, they are good just at a 1 year. So maybe he'll do the same.
Yeah, I think that's exactly where I would put him for the exact same reasons. If we go on based on potential, I mean, he could be best in the game because he has so much
Mm-hmm.
potential. But yeah, I think he's right there in the good tier. He does benefit a little bit with Julio leaving.
Mm-hmm.
He's definitely getting some more touches. So yeah, I think it's sooner rather than later he'll be in that great tier. But at least as we stand right now on end of June, he's right there in the top end of the good. So not too much to add there. And
The,
I do
the,
think Chris would agree with you too, because he was saying during our last episode to kind of temper expectations on Pitts. So I think he would agree with where we put him as well.
and there,
Sorry,
and
would you add?
Yeah, there is actually one more guy that was not on this tier list I do think is worth talking about. And when I say his name, you're probably be like, what? Who's that? But Adam Troutman, tight end for the Saints, I do think he'll actually
I
be
do know
very
who he is.
good this year. Obviously, with Cook leaving, I think that kind of leaves him to be the tight end one. And since, there's not really a whole ton of weapons left on the Saints offense, I do think Troutman will actually be very good for fantasy purposes and real life. Am I calling for a breakout year? We'll see. I think it's very possible. I would for this tier list. I would put him in the good tier. Obviously, we have to see it happen first, similar to Cole Komet. tight ends in their first year aren't very good. But I do think Komet and Troutman will both have great year twos. So where would you put him on this tier list?
Um, like I want to say the good tier, but I think since we put Komet in that
Mm-hmm.
average tier, I'd probably put him with Komet.
Yeah.
Um, for like the same reasons. And like you said, I think Comet, I think that's like right where we have him right now is like his floor.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the same thing with Troutman. I think it's really only up and up for them.
I agree.
I agree with that. And actually, one more guy too, as you were talking, we actually mentioned this guy earlier in the episode. It's kind of a joke, but Tim Tebow now is a tight end.
Mm-hmm.
Where would you put him in this tier list?
Well, considering we haven't seen him play in like 8 years at the tight end position as well, it kind of just compounds on each other. I have no idea what to think of him as a tight end. Maybe does he? Well, first of all, does he even make the team? I think he will. And how much playing time will he get? I have no idea. I'd put him right in front in front of Zach Ertz, maybe.
I mean, I don't know. I feel like I would probably put him in trash
Yeah,
just because we
well,
don't know.
yeah.
And the only video
That's a
we
good
have of him
question,
trying to
though. Yeah.
catch a NFL pass is
Him
the
in the
one that hangs
face.
off his helmet.
Yeah,
Yeah, so based on what we know now, I'd probably put him in trash, but who knows? I hope he makes the team just because it's entertaining.
I
And
think he
that's
will.
probably why he's go. I mean, let's be honest. This is just a ploy to sell jerseys to
Yeah.
get up ticket sales
He
for entertainment. He's definitely making the preseason roster. He's
yeah.
definitely going to play in preseason games. I hope he makes the regular season roster too.
He's not making the regular season team because he's good. Let's just say that. I think it'll just be because of what you said,
Yeah,
the getting the eyes, his connection with Urban Meyer. He'll make the team just because of that reason. I mean, maybe he's somewhat decent at tight end, but I don't think that'll be a good enough reason for him to make the team.
yeah. I know we talked about this on the prior episode too, but it just looks so stupid when you go to the Jaguars like shop website and it was like get new Jags apparel and it was Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, and then Tim Tebow, and those were the jerseys. And I'm it wouldn't surprise. I mean, I feel like Tebow jerseys were definitely higher than Etienne's. And if Trevor Lawrence wasn't like the Jesus Christ of Jacksonville right now, it'd probably be above those too. And that's just how big of a following and kind of a meme Tebow is at this point. But yeah.
Hmm.
All right, I just want to talk about him real quick. Overall, though, I think this tier list is really good. I like that we have a lot of guys right there in the average tier, and then also in the good tier, excuse me, and then we also have quite a few in the average tier because I feel like that's where most of the tight ends are. They're all kind of like interchangeable guys, or at least guys who are unproven or have a lot of potential. So I like that's kind of how it shook out, and I feel like the guys we have in the great tier and the best in the game tier are clearly the great and the best. So yeah, any thoughts you wanted to add here before we get out of here?
Well, yeah, it's clear that the top two tiers are levels above the good starters. However, if you're looking at it in a fantasy perspective, most of the good starters are actually still, viable for fantasy purposes.
Yeah,
They'll get you through a couple games, and you can all get them middle to late rounds. So don't feel like you have to take a tight end in the first 2, 3 rounds when you can get a guy like Logan Thomas, who was a late round pick last year, and he was very good. A guy like Tunyon. So there will be some value in the later rounds. You don't have to reach in the first 2, 3.
well, and honestly, even guys like Hawkinson, Gronk, maybe even Mark Andrews, I could see them going behind Kyle Pitts, and those
Yeah.
could be some good value tight ends as well. So you could even get a great guy if you missed out on one of those top three. Because I feel like Pitts, I think this was Chris's big point in our last episode, was about how he's going to go super high in redraft leagues, um, and I feel like that's probably going to happen. I agree with that. So, but yeah, overall, I think it's great. And I think, I'm really interested to see guys like Noah Fant, like Kyle Pitts, like Dallas Goedert, what they do, Gesicki, what they do with maybe this more expanded opportunities in their next years. Even guys like Komet and Troutman, like you mentioned too. It's going to be fun to see. I love the tight end position. I could talk about it all day. But yeah, I think I had a lot of fun with you doing this. And yeah, if you have nothing else to add, I just have one more thing to say. I can't believe we're recording this on June 23rd. So which means about 14 hours ago, the Detroit sports world was set on fire when the Pistons actually, and not just the Pistons, but the Detroit sports won a thing, which is the first time it's happened in like a decade. And it was a lucky thing too. I mean, it's insane. But the Pistons got the first overall pick, most
Yep.
likely going to get Cade Cunningham. It was awesome last night. So yeah, I wanted to shout that out real quick before we get out of here. But
Fair
yeah,
enough.
it's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, but that'll do it for this episode. Once again, we're the Zone Defense Podcast. This will be our final position tier list, but we're probably going to do another tier list right before the start of the NFL season. So in a few months, kind of doing all the different teams, and we might revisit that like mid-season, and we might do another one entering the playoffs. I do believe we made a tier list entering last postseason. Maybe not, but I feel like maybe we did. Kind of tearing up the different teams. Maybe not. Maybe I'm thinking about the spreadsheet we did for the playoffs. I think that's what I'm thinking of. It looked kind of like a tier list, but we've gotten some good kind of traction on these episodes. Thank you for everyone for checking them out. However, this is not the end of all of our NFL offseason content. We'll be doing some fantasy football rankings. We'll be doing another fantasy mock draft, and we'll be doing division by division predictions for the 2021 season. Those are probably the next things we'll be starting out, so make sure you check out all those. Chris and I will also keep doing Zone Defense Basketball Hour episodes, kind of breaking down the NBA. We'll be talking about the NBA draft lottery and how the Cade Cunningham might be coming to Detroit, which is awesome, like I said earlier. And we'll also be doing the conference finals, the finals. So like I said earlier at the top of the episode, if you haven't already subscribed to our channel, make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Spotify and Twitter at Zone Defense Pod, and make sure you search us on Apple Podcasts. Smash that like button and drop a comment down below. Let us know what you thought about our tier list. Like I said, I think this might be our best tier list we've done yet. I feel like it's very fair and very accurate. But if you have any hot takes that are against this, I think the hottest take thing we did maybe was put Kittle above a Kelsey. So if you disagree with that, be sure to let us know in the comments. We love reading all of them, and we try to respond to them as quickly as we can. But once again, thank you for listening to this episode, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.